As usual, I want to kind of talk about what we learned this past week in the National Football League for Week 9. And one thing that really stood out to me, first off, is the Packers, and not only the Packers, but Jordan Love. You know, I think he's a fantastic player. But what I learned is that they're only going to go as far as he will take them. And I'm not quite sure if he can take them all the way. Now, I will say, they suffered another loss. They're 0-2 now in the NFC North, if I'm not mistaken. They lost to the Vikings, and they just lost to the Detroit Lions 24-14 this past weekend at home. And Jordan Love was a little bit inconsistent. And then to me, that's a big question mark for me, is that he has the ability to elevate them, and then he has the ability to bring them down. It's kind of like a double-edged sword with him when you're talking about Jordan Love. Overall, did he play okay this past weekend? Absolutely. Did they get the win? No, they didn't. And a lot of it falls on him. Honestly, he had a big interception in that game and against a Lions team that you really can't make mistakes on because they're good enough to overcome that and still get the win over you, which they've proven to do that, which they're one of the best teams in the National Football League, right? And then not to mention, Jordan Love is still hampered by some injuries. I believe he's dealing with a growing injury, so his mobility isn't the best, right? So, and then just some key critical mistakes down the stretch late in that game where I felt like the Packers maybe could have gotten back into it. But here's the thing. The buck stops with Jordan Love at the end of the day, right? As it is for most quarterbacks in the National Football League. If your team is going to be successful and you're looking to make a deep run, possibly win a championship or a Super Bowl, mind you, your quarterback play has to be astounding, right? It doesn't have to be great all the time, but in matters where it means the most, he needs to step up. And against two really top division foes, mind you, not even in NFC, but two divisional teams in the Minnesota Vikings and the Detroit Lions, they just could not get the job done. Now, it's a team effort, but he is going to have to play better in order to elevate this team to get them to the promised land. Some people are looking at the Packers now as maybe possibly being an overrated team, right? And I'm not quite there yet. I still think they have a chance, but he's going to have to get healthier, which is easier said than done. But he's also going to have to clean up some of these mistakes. And I've been on this. I've been on this video, on my NFL matchups, on my Sunday morning show. I've always said this about the Packers. They have to come out the gates playing at 100% full clip from the jump. They tend to struggle early on in games, and then they try to turn it on. But at that point, it's too late in the ball game. So Jordan Love is definitely going to have to be better, and the Packers are going to have to trust that he's going to be better if they're going to make a run towards the Super Bowl. But better yet, they need to start focusing in their own division and trying to get on top of the NFC North, which is going to be difficult because the Vikings are getting back on track, and as well as the Lions as they sit on top as the kings of the NFC North. Moving right along, what did we learn this past week in the National Football League? I want to talk about the Denver Broncos and their lackluster performance on the road in a big matchup against the Baltimore Ravens, who we arguably think is one of the best teams in the National Football League, behind the teams like the Lions, maybe the Chiefs, et cetera, right? But they came into this game. I think a lot of people were a little bit on the fence, unless you're a Broncos fan who they probably thought they were legitimate contenders. But what this game ultimately proved to me is that they're not ready yet. In a game where I felt like this was a big test for them. And I said it on my NFL Sunday wake-up show because there was a comment made about the Broncos. And I said, listen, if they go out and win this game or even lose respectably, I would give them credit. But the fact of the matter is that they basically got destroyed. And I was surprised in the fact that they got destroyed on defense. Now, I know their offense is a little bit inconsistent, and I know Bo Nix has been playing a little bit better, but overall, this defense, honestly, 41-10. And I get it. You're playing Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. I believe the Ravens rattled off 7 consecutive scoring drives. Lamar Jackson, I think, had a damn near a perfect passer rating, and then Derrick Henry ran roughshod over 106 yards. So, and it doesn't get any easier for the Denver Broncos. They're sitting at 5-4, I believe now, and they still have matchups against the Chiefs and the Chargers within their own division. So I think they're sitting at 5th in the AFC right now overall. If they want to try to stay on pace to make a playoff berth, which would be actually pretty surprising for me, I don't think it's going to happen just because they just don't have enough in their arsenal at the end of the day, especially when you're talking about competing against the big boys in the National Football League. But after Sunday's showing, it's pretty clear to me that they are pretenders and they don't need to be talked about as any type of contender moving forward, unless they can fix some problems on the offense as well as shore up their defense again, especially when they play really relevant teams. So, I was on record saying that they really hadn't played anybody, with the exception of that really good win on the road a couple weeks ago earlier in the season against Tampa Bay. But since then, they pretty much played nobody, and that showed Sunday afternoon against the Baltimore Ravens. In my final, what we learned this past week in the National Football League, I want to talk about the New Orleans Saints. They recently just fired their head coach, Dennis Allen, who honestly, he survived a lot longer than I thought I thought he should have, honestly. But that loss that they had this past weekend to Carolina proved to me that they are in a very tough spot. And not all of it is Dennis Allen's fault. Obviously, he's a coach. He was a coach for them. And so on the field, yeah, definitely. But when you look at their roster, they never considered themselves in a full rebuild after Drew Brees retired. And to me, that was a little bit negligent. This team is full of old-aged veteran players, and their salary cap hit by, I believe, is like $62 million. This is making them one of the worst teams in the National Football League. At this point, you got Derek Carr, Alvin Kamara, Cam Jordan, Marshawn Lattimore, guys that they probably all need to move off at some point, especially Derek Carr. With the trade deadline approaching or past, I would say, or if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if there's a move to be made for this team. Definitely in the offseason, something needs to happen because this team is done. They are in full rebuild mode, whether they like it or not, or whether they choose to accept it or not. And I know the Saints fans, they're a very passionate bunch, and I think they deserve the better. They only got that one Super Bowl in the last 20-something years when they've had really good teams throughout the last 20-something years. And to me, this roster, is not built to win. They tried to go and get another quarterback by signing Derek Carr, then trying to draft Spencer Rattler. That didn't turn out. But the fact of the matter is that this roster was outdated, very aged, and they did not do what they needed to do in order to move some guys around, in order to get some more draft picks and more collateral in order to make this team young, vibrant, and more salary cap affordable. So Dennis Allen's out. I don't know what the answer is for this team because I think they're in a limbo. Really, like I said before, you got guys like Alvin Kamara, who's on the tail end of his career, obviously, right? So same with Cam Jordan, Marshawn Lattimore. All your top players are on the back nine of their careers, so to say. And moving them, I think, would help them, honestly. But does it help the team itself? I don't know, because who's going to want to trade for some of these guys at the end of the day? But the Saints, once a very proud franchise, to me, losing to the Carolina Panthers was just an abomination to all Saints fans, past or present. And this team is definitely in a bad spot moving forward.